My mother-in-law poisoned me for 3 years to prove my allergy was bogus. I woke up in the ICU. Police handed me her red journal, a sociopath science project. See, I've been severely allergic to all types of shellfish my entire life. And I'm not talking about a little rash or an upset stomach. No, if I don't get a heavy-duty EpiPen within 3 minutes of exposure, my throat slams shut, my blood pressure plummets, and I suffocate to death. My body reacts to a microscopic trace of shrimp protein like it's weaponized anthrax. My life is an intricate military operation just to eat. Every meal out means grilling waitstaff, double-checking labels, and always carrying 2 EpiPens. I told Mark, my now husband, all about this on our very first date. I didn't want him thinking I was some high-maintenance nightmare when I asked the chef to change their gloves. But Mark? He was amazing. By our 3rd date, he'd mastered the EpiPen. 6 months into our relationship, he was the one asking about cross-contamination before I even opened my mouth. He made me feel safe. Then there was Brenda, Mark's mother, 61 years old, and my complete opposite. The first time Mark took me to his childhood home for Sunday supper in Chicago, Brenda made her stance on my allergy abundantly clear. When Mark mentioned my severe allergy, she dramatically rolled her eyes, slammed down a serving of crab-stuffed mushrooms, and scoffed. "Young people today are so desperate to be special," she snarled directly into my face. "In my day, we ate what was put in front of us. Nobody had these imaginary allergies. It's just an eating disorder disguised as a quirk." I was stunned. I pulled up my sleeve to show her my bright red medical alert bracelet. I even offered to show her the prescription for my auto-injectors. I told her about the time I was 7 and passed out in an ambulance because a family friend used the same spoon for my pasta as they did for a seafood boil. Brenda just waved her hand dismissively. "Doctors will diagnose anything if you pay them enough. It's a mental block. You just need to get over yourself." Those early family dinners became psychological battlegrounds. Brenda would purposefully prepare enormous, elaborate seafood feasts, shrimp scampi, clam chowder, lobster bisque. Then she'd act deeply, personally insulted when I sat there, eating the safe protein bar Mark had brought for me. My picky face was destroying the mood. She'd sigh loudly, apologizing to the rest of the family for the disruption. If Mark brought me a separate meal from a safe restaurant, Brenda called it a slap in the face to the matriarch of the house. She started muttering to Mark's aunts and cousins that I was faking an illness to control Mark and isolate him from his family. Then the accidents began. About a year into my marriage, we'd go over there for what was supposed to be a safe meal. Brenda would vouch that the chicken marinara had no shellfish. A few bites, and 20 minutes later, that terrible, familiar sensation would start, lips tingling, hands itching, chest tightening. I'd panic, dry swallow handfuls of antihistamines, and sit in the bathroom, terrified, wondering if my throat would suddenly close. Whenever Mark would rush out and confront her, Brenda would just giggle. "Oh, please. I used a tiny splash of oyster sauce for a mommy. If she was really allergic, she'd be dead on the floor. See? She's fine." I cured her little mental block. Mark would explode. He'd yell at her. We'd pack our things and leave. We stopped eating at her place altogether, then we stopped going to Sunday dinners entirely. But Brenda was relentless. She started showing up at our apartment without warning, Tupperware in hand, screaming crocodile tears, declaring she'd turned a new leaf. She'd prepared a vegan soup guaranteed to be completely safe. I never touched it. I took it, then I threw it away as soon as she left. When she found out, she launched a massive smear campaign, telling the entire extended family I was a vengeful, terrible daughter-in-law, punishing an elderly mother for a simple mistake. The day she finally tried to kill me was the breaking point. This was just 3 weeks ago, on Mark's 32nd birthday. We were at a fancy, well-reviewed Italian restaurant. Mark's dad, Arthur, had paid for a private room. Brenda, playing the benevolent mother, insisted on ordering for the table. When it came to me, she loudly and performatively told the waiter, "My daughter-in-law has a seafood sensitivity. Please make sure her mushroom truffle risotto is completely clean. We don't want any drama tonight." The waiter nodded, assured us it was made in a separate pan, 100% safe. I was exhausted by the family drama, I was hungry, and the waiter had verified it. So, when the food arrived, I ate it. But unlike before, it didn't take 20 minutes. It was over in less than 90 seconds. The moment I swallowed my third bite, it felt like someone had poured battery acid down my esophagus. The reaction wasn't just rapid, it was explosive. Almost instantly, my vision tunneled. A metallic taste flooded my mouth. I tried to say Mark's name, but I couldn't. My airway was closing faster than it ever had in my entire life. I gripped my throat, accidentally knocking over my wine glass. It shattered. I looked at Mark, and I saw the horror dawn on his face as mine turned a terrible shade of blue. He didn't hesitate. He ripped open my purse, grabbed an EpiPen, withdrew the blue safety release, and plunged the needle into my outer thigh, right through my clothes. "Someone call 911, he screamed. "What is he doing?" Arthur yelled. "And Brenda?" She just sat there, sipping her wine, looking slightly irritated. "Oh, stop it," I heard her voice over the ringing in my ears. "She's just having a panic attack. You're indulging her delusions, Mark." I don't remember the ambulance ride. I don't remember the paramedics shouting about my plummeting blood pressure. I just remember waking up hours later in the ICU, hooked up to an 4 cocktail of epinephrine, steroids, and antihistamines. It felt like a cinder block was crushing my chest. My throat was so sore and swollen I couldn't even swallow my own saliva. Mark was a ghost beside my bed, eyes bloodshot, hands shaking. When he saw I was awake, he burst into tears and buried his face in my blankets. A few minutes later, the ER doctor came in, followed by 2 uniformed officers. The doctor looked grim. She explained that my severe reaction wasn't from a small amount of cross-contamination. I had ingested a tremendous quantity of pure, highly concentrated shellfish protein. She asserted that if Mark had hesitated even for a moment, I would be in the morgue. Officer Sarah Jenkins then stepped forward. She asked if I was lucid enough to understand what she was about to tell me. I gave a feeble nod. The restaurant management had followed the ambulance to the hospital. As soon as he realized he was genuinely terrified of a multi-million-dollar negligence lawsuit, he pulled the security tape from the dining room to figure out how the kitchen had messed up. But there was no kitchen mess. The security video showed Brenda alone at the table, after Mark and I had gone to the restroom. On 2 separate occasions, she glanced behind her. Then, she reached into her luxury purse, pulled out a small amber glass vial, unscrewed the dropper, and squirted a substantial quantity of thick liquid directly into my risotto. As soon as we got back to the table, she sat back with a smug smirk, hid the vial, and swirled my risotto with her fork, perfectly blending it in. Brenda was taken into custody by police as soon as she arrived at the hospital waiting area. She confidently handed Officer Jenkins her purse, claiming it was nothing more than some extra fish sauce for flavor. Officer Jenkins inspected it. It was not fish sauce. Inside Brenda's bag, Officer Jenkins found 4 identical amber vials. They weren't from a grocery store. The labels were sterile pharmaceutical products. Medical grade, extremely concentrated crustacean extract, the exact kind allergy testing facilities use to induce reactions in controlled medical settings. But that wasn't the worst part. Buried at the bottom of Brenda's purse, right there in my hospital room, Officer Jenkins found a lengthy red leather diary. She opened it. Inside was a precise, psychotic logbook documenting every single instance Brenda had poisoned me over the previous 3 years. Dozens of entries. She referred to me as subject. Officer Jenkins read a statement aloud, her voice disgusted. October 14th. Added 1/4 teaspoon of dried shrimp powder to subject's marinara. Subject displayed mild flushing and anxiety. Took medication. No hospital visit required. Proves reaction is largely psychosomatic. Will increase dosage next month to break the mental barrier. Another entry, from Thanksgiving, November 25th, injected scallop broth into subject's turkey slice. Subject claimed throat felt tight. Left dinner early. Dramatic behavior continues. Exposure therapy is working slowly. Brenda had been methodically poisoning me, treating me like a lab rat, gradually increasing the doses over 3 years, all to prove that she was correct and my doctors were wrong. Officer Jenkins told me they had taken Brenda into custody right there in the waiting area. She fought the handcuffs, yelling at the top of her lungs that she was a worried mother practicing exposure therapy she'd read about on Facebook, and that I was attempting to destroy her family over a misunderstanding. She was escorted out of the hospital in front of everyone who heard. Lying there in my hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, the realization hit me. My mother-in-law had spent the last 3 years deliberately trying to kill me, without success. Since that restaurant tragedy 4 weeks ago, the repercussions have been catastrophic. I was discharged after 3 days, but my body is a mess. The physician said Brenda had actually hypersensitized my immune system over those 3 years with her secret microexposures. The severity of my allergy has drastically increased. I can't even be in the same room as someone cooking seafood without my throat constricting. The mental health damage is even worse. I developed severe food trauma. For the first 2 weeks, I couldn't eat anything. I lost 12 pounds. Looking at a piece of toast I'd made myself in my now completely uncontaminated kitchen would send me hyperventilating. Mark had to physically hold me while I sobbed over a bowl of plain rice. Now, I'm in intensive trauma therapy twice a week with a specialist, Dr. Hayes. My goal is to learn how to eat without feeling like I'm playing Russian roulette. When my sister, Elena, found out what happened, she immediately flew out, wanting to drive to the county jail and burn it down. Mark is a shell of a human. The guilt is crushing him. He keeps reminding himself he should have cut her off the very first time she made a passive-aggressive comment. I constantly try to convince him it's not his fault, that we couldn't have known she was a literal psychopath, but it's destroying him. A week after I was discharged, we were summoned to the district attorney's office. David Vance, a shrewd individual, had all the evidence laid out on a big conference table. This was no joke. Brenda was charged with attempted murder and aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. DA Vance showed us the forensic report on the amber vials. This wasn't something she stumbled upon. You can't just buy medical-grade allergen extract at a pharmacy. Brenda had gone out of her way to find a specialty medical supplies provider online. She'd circumvented their credential verification by creating a fictitious LLC, claiming to be a holistic allergy clinic. It cost her $850 per vial. She paid for expedited, discreet shipping. Pointing to the invoice, DA Vance informed us this wasn't a crime of ignorance. This was a highly premeditated, financially calculated, targeted assassination attempt disguised as a medical experiment. She spent thousands of dollars to acquire a weapon she knew could kill you. The moment Arthur, Mark's father, learned about the extract and the red journal, he was utterly overwhelmed. He asked to meet us at a serene coffee shop. He looked like he hadn't slept in a month, his hands shaking even as he clutched his cup. He told us Brenda had played the nurturing, supportive mother-in-law when he was around. He had no idea. Then, sitting at the table, Arthur started to cry. He told Mark he had legally filed for divorce. He was buying Brenda out of her share of their assets, changing the locks, and had already agreed to be a character witness for the prosecution. He looked at me and said, "I cannot share a bed with a woman who attempted to put my daughter-in-law in a casket." He was absolutely right. But, of course, every poisonous family has its flying monkeys. 3 days later, I got a call from Brenda's sister, Aunt Carol, completely out of her mind. Using a burner phone to bypass my blocked numbers, she started screaming so loud her speaker distorted. "You self-centered, dramatic little. You are tearing this family apart over a stomachache. Brenda is a good Christian woman who made a tiny mistake. She was trying to help you. Families forgive each other, but you're trying to send a grandmother to a maximum security prison because you want attention." I didn't say a word. I hung up and blocked the number. But it showed me the awful truth. In their warped imaginations, I was the bad guy because I survived. The most stunning twist, though, is how this went from a family disagreement to a state-level criminal probe. Mark's cousins started talking after hearing about the red journal. Immediately, they began comparing notes. Sarah, Mark's cousin, has a severe peanut allergy. For the past 5 years, Brenda had always prepared a special peanut-free pad thai just for her. After Sarah ended up in the emergency room with hives, Brenda claimed the noodles must have been cross-contaminated at the factory. One of Mark's closest friends' wives has celiac disease. For 4 years, Brenda would make her a gluten-free cake. The wife would be violently ill for a week. Brenda would assert she misread the flour label. Once DA Vance heard this, he issued a warrant to search Brenda's residence. The cops searched her attic. It wasn't just my red journal they found. They found 5 journals. Brenda had been doing this for over a decade. She had a god complex. She had secretly poisoned at least 8 different people in Mark's wide social circle over 12 years. She genuinely believed all food allergies, intolerances, and autoimmune diets were weak people seeking attention. Every single one was meticulously documented. There were more victims than just me. But I was the only one whose allergy was so extreme it came dangerously close to taking my life. She wasn't some bewildered, elderly woman. She was a repeat offender of medical abuse. Yesterday, the trial ended. I'm typing this from my new apartment, hundreds of miles away from Chicago, finally feeling like I can breathe. The trial was swift, thanks to the overwhelming evidence, the surveillance footage, the dark web purchases, all 6 confession journals, and the testimonies of 5 additional victims. Brenda refused a plea bargain. Her narcissistic delusion was so deep she truly believed she could take the stand, present her exposure therapy beliefs to a jury, and they would applaud her for her innovative medical genius. Her defense attorney practically tried to hide throughout the proceedings. Brenda sat at the defense table in a pastel cardigan, attempting to project the image of a fragile, innocent grandma. Her attorney tried to portray her as suffering from early-onset dementia, just confused about my food limitations. But DA Vance was merciless. He called my emergency room physician to the stand, who clinically detailed exactly what happens to the human body during stage 4 anaphylaxis. He demanded the forensic accountant testify publicly, showing Brenda had spent $3,400 for the weaponized extract. Then, one after another, DA Vance displayed the restaurant security video on a huge screen in the courtroom. Brenda, looking shady, taking out the vial, poisoning my meal while the entire jury watched in stunned silence. I was on the stand for 4 agonizing hours. The defense attorney tried to rattle me, asking if I had ever exaggerated my symptoms to get Mark to pay more attention to me. DA Vance's objection was so forceful the judge almost shattered his gavel. I kept my composure. I looked directly at the jury and told them exactly how it felt to realize a member of my own family was watching me suffocate for her own amusement. There were precisely 2 hours of deliberation before the jury returned. Guilty. On every count. Attempted first-degree murder. Aggravated assault. The sentencing hearing was the morning before yesterday. The judge was not swayed. He read Brenda's court-ordered psychological evaluation, severe Munchausen by proxy, combined with a severe narcissistic personality disorder. The judge looked down from his bench and stated, "In my 20 years on the bench, I have rarely seen a defendant so utterly devoid of remorse, empathy, or basic human decency. You weaponized food against your own family to stroke your own ego." She was sentenced to 18 years in a state penitentiary, with mandatory psychiatric therapy and no chance of release for 14 years. She'll be almost 80 before she even might see the outside of a cell. When the judge read the sentence, Brenda's facade utterly shattered. The sweet old grandma disappeared. She jumped out of her chair, her face contorted in a pure, diabolical rage, screaming at me across the courtroom. Struggling against 2 bailiffs who grabbed her arms, she shrieked, "This is your fault. You ruined my son. You destroyed my family over a stupid stomach ache. You should have died. You should have just died." The courtroom was silent, except for her uncontrollable shrieking as they dragged her through a side door. Honestly, it was the most affirming experience of my entire life. Any lingering remorse I had absolutely vanished. In front of the court, the jury, and the entire world, she showed her true identity. Mark reached out and took my hand, tears streaming down his face, and we walked out of that courthouse together. Every aspect of our lives has been radically uprooted. We moved to a new city in a different state. We've changed our phone numbers. Mark has severed ties with every single family member who supported Brenda, even Aunt Carol. The only person we speak to is Arthur, who's finalizing his divorce and moving on. I'm making progress with my trauma therapy with Dr. Hayes. I'm gradually reintroducing safe restaurant food into my life. I've even founded an advocacy site for people coping with severe food allergies and toxic family members who refuse to believe them. The response has been astounding. So many people can't speak about their suffering because they don't want to cause drama. This is what I'm here to tell you. Let the drama begin. Set the limit. Be careful with your life. Because if I hadn't had that EpiPen, if Mark hadn't believed me and acted so fast, I wouldn't be here to type this. I'm finally getting to live my life, while Brenda is condemned to spend the next 20 years confined in a concrete box. I still can't believe this happened. It makes me wonder, have any of you ever had to deal with someone who refused to believe your medical condition, or worse, weaponized it against you? What would you have done in my shoes? Tell me your thoughts in the comments below. I really want to know.